Hello, and welcome to a reboot of the second episode of Ideas with Diana. We've been off podcast and off the air for a long time. We originally started at WIPZ at UW Parkside College radio station. We were in the top rating of the college rated Arbitron ratings, but most importantly, we were in the top rating in the hearts and minds of the students at Parkside and many of the faculty. Although sometimes basically people were afraid to publicly admit it because we were sometimes considered, and I was considered like the Howard Stern of college radio because there are a few times that I received warnings from the show because basically we talked about things that sometimes some people didn't wish the students to know about. That, like, for example, if you feel you got a bad grade or you feel that your instructors are being biased against you, that's why there's a board of regents. You can always file a complaint against the board of regents. It's not going to hurt you when you apply to medical school. It's not going to hurt you when you apply to graduate school. But a lot of students were sort of told, no, 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 no. I did it. I had to do it when I was in pre-med. I'm glad I did. The other thing is basically the other thing is you have counselors, but sometimes the board of regents, you have to go over people's heads because when you try to work with the system, they won't work with you. Go over their head. I found there many times I had to do that myself. And they're going to say, well, again, you're a bad boy or bad girl. So what? You have your right to you have the right to do it. But today's podcast is about the right for cultural identity and cultural existence. This afternoon, I should say, on Sky News and other things, I heard a broadcast from the United Nations given by the representative from the Palestinian state, and also partial response from Israel as it was cut off. I don't hear the whole response from the delegate from Israel, but as per being raised upper middle class and in a professional family, I keep a neutral point of view, and I've always hearing both sides. Also, listening to different media like RT and other media that basically some people in certain parts of the world can't listen to because it's like old Milwaukee rock radio used to be filtered. You could listen to rock music as it's filtered or safe, or as they used to say in the Soviet Union, you could listen to certain records as long as it's proven safe by the committee, like that though. I really don't think that's a good policy. But to get the right of cultural identity and cultural existence. Every culture has a right to their cultural identity and cultural existence as long as they coexist and live coexistently and coexist with other neighbors and out peacefully. That doesn't mean that you cede your right to self-defense. That doesn't mean that you cede your right to having a defense force when needed against aggressive neighbors. Because some people are pacifists and we don't want to believe in maintaining an army or keeping an army. Then therefore, they have to have a self-defense force. Or other peoples are so impoverished that they don't have the resources to maintain and keep an army. So they do need a self-defense force. The International Criminal Courts is one form of a self-defense force, but actually, I understand the UN talked other form of self-defense forces. I think the term used to be called blue helmets or something like that, though. But even with what I've seen from the foreign news regarding how blue helmets are treated in certain portions during this conflict, um, I think something a little bit stronger is needed because basically, um, I've seen footage from different news reports, and I'm very concerned about that. In cultural identity, everyone has a right to their own cultural identity and cultural existence. Being part Polish, I know that more than anyone else. Poland has been partitioned 5 times in its history. And the way the Polish people and Polish culture and identity survived was through the Polish trilogy. Just like in Russia, the way the Russian culture survived through different stages of its culture is through Pushkin. And prior to that. So, but basically, Pushkin is the identity of Russia. Polish trilogy defines the Polish trilogy of Poland. And Kant defines the good German identity of Germany in that, though, as well as uh, Descartes defines the good cultural identity of France. And Hugh, again, good cultural identity of England, in that, as well as a Tale of Two Cities with the Scarlet Pimpernel. However, when cultural identity is denied, this causes a lot of problems because living in Milwaukee, even we went through this many years in Milwaukee. We used to call it the Fourth Reich, and it's many people today still refer to Oktoberfest as Nazi Fest because they feel the problem still hasn't been resolved. I mean, I partially feel that way too. I only go up to Milwaukee when I really have to visit my doctors. But basically at the research park. But the research park is a different part of Milwaukee. And also, I do visit Milwaukee. I visit certain good parts of Milwaukee in downtown area, which is nice. But there are other parts of Milwaukee I wouldn't visit because basically, if I were to go there, I wouldn't get served. If I went to it, because some people say, well, you're not really. Again, Supreme Court said in 2016 LGBT is legal, and also people who are transgender or intersex, or as I am, have the same rights as everyone else. So stop the discrimination. However, even in the days even in the strongest days of Fourth Reich in Milwaukee, the biggest thing that kept Milwaukee an American city was basically a cultural conscience. And the cultural conscience of Milwaukee was Carl Zimmerman of TV6 News and the old TV6 News. Because every Saturday night they had Speak Freely. So basically people could write in or write in, and they read about what their thoughts were. And Carl Zimmerman was the conscience and the voice of Milwaukee, because when some things went on, like the 1967 Housing Riots for Fair Housing in Milwaukee, which was discussed in an episode Black Nouveau on PBS Channel 10 Milwaukee. I didn't get a chance to miss it. I'll try to watch that again. Father Gloppy was part of this, and Father Gloppy was the other conscience of Milwaukee. Many people supported Father Gloppy. My family supported Father Gloppy in that, though. And the thing is, a friend of mine knew Father Gloppy, and also he supported people who made decisions whether to participate in the Vietnam War or not. But the point was, it was a conscience of Milwaukee, Carl Zimmerman, Carl Gloppy, that helped hold the city together through these Fourth Reich Nazis and these fat Nazis with their brown shirts. And I remember when my parents were separated, I would visit my mother in downtown Milwaukee on Cass Street, and we have to walk, and we go to Big Boy, which is then on Wisconsin Avenue, and we have to walk by, and they always would try to hand us their literature, because they always tried to say, well, you look pure Aryan. There's no such thing as a pure Aryan. And what happened, we hated that, because even though I'm part German on my mother's side, we were the Germans of Kant, and we were also the Germans of Liszt and Wagner, like that. We were not the disgusting thugs like that tried to handle that literature. And even when they tried to speak German, God, horrible. They didn't even know the. And the reason why I say this, because when my parents lived on the East Coast, my sister and I went to a school which was Pennsylvania Dutch. So for kindergarten through first grade, we were taught in German. So when we moved back to Wisconsin, my sister being a little bit older, was able to acclimate faster. But for me, I had to take a year of first grade over, because part of the thing is basically I still was used to speaking in school in German, so I had to get used to speaking again in English. And also because my family, we spoke multiple languages. We spoke English, French, German in the house, but mostly at one time we eventually went to French, and then also Polish, but mostly French, some Polish, like that, though not as much German. But I still can read in those languages and partially write in those languages, but it takes time due to my health issues. But the point is, we didn't give up on cultural identity. Because my family has a lot of cultural identity. I mean, if I would think of my grandfathers, one of my grandfathers is from Salzburg. Another one of my grandfathers is from Vilno. My grandmother is from one of my grandmothers is from St. Petersburg. Another one of my grandmother is from Berlin. And also part of my family is also Scotch-Irish, so Scotch-Irish heritage. And my great-grandmother actually is from a clan in Scotland, like that. Though I don't know the tartan, but I'd like to find out someday. But so regarding culture, everyone has a right to keep the culture. Everyone has a right to keep their identity. Even everyone has a right to speak the language they want to speak in church. Because when I lived in Kenosha, um, I lived in a neighborhood where we had three churches. We referred to them as the Italian Church, the Russian Church, and the Polish Church. Italian Church was Holy Rosary. The Russian Church was the Russian Orthodox Church, which was right next to my school, Jefferson Elementary. The Polish church was St. Casimir's, and even when you go to St. Casimir, when you look at the thing, it'll say Skoya instead of school, which Skoya school in Polish, and they taught classes in Polish, and Russian church taught classes in Russian, and Italian church taught classes in Italian, but it's multilingual. So I don't see what the problem is when we have some of these people say, well, we don't want people speaking like Russian, we want people speaking Old Euclid. Even in the United States now, God, I mean, that would not hold, not even the United States. Because, for example, like when I go to a fast food restaurant, a common thing for being a manager in a fast food restaurant is you have to know Espanol. And the thing is, what happens, even though many people in a fast food restaurant learn American English to work in the United States when they come from Mexico or other Latin American countries, you still have to know Espanol, because sometimes when something needs to be done quickly, it's easy to say it quickly in Espanol to make sure that it gets done rather than wait for the translation. And so what happens? So the thing is, when we have people that sort of say, well, we only want people speaking one language in our country, like in Ukraine. Well, no one can speak Russian. Oh God! Don't you guys know that that doesn't exist anywhere in the world, even in the European Union, which you're trying to become a part of. I remember years ago I worked with people from the European as a medical lease. I asked them, I said, what about, I asked them about how the kids are educated. They said, oh yeah, well what happens, we have a dual language program. We teach English and the local language side by side. So basically, if you're in France, you learn English and French side by side. If in Germany, you learn English and Deutsch side by side. If you're Italian, you learn English and Italia. Or in Spain, English and Espanol. I don't understand why with this thing with Ukraine, why they just can't go, well, okay, why not just have language classes where you teach Ukrainian and Russian side by side? Easy. You don't have to have a war. You don't have to have 1 million people killed. But also it goes like what happens even with the Middle East. So I mean, it's like, fine, people want to have the religious and cultural identity. That's okay. You can have that as long as you don't impact someone else's human rights and civil rights. In the United States, we have freedom of religion and freedom of speech, but there are limitations. You can't have someone saying, well, I'm going to burn you at the stake because you don't believe in Jesus Christ. Or you can't say someone say, well, I'm not going to let you talk about that because you're a heathen. No. We also have a strong Supreme Court, but we also have a strong Congress. And the problem is many countries don't have a strong Supreme Court. They don't have a Congress. And even the state of Israel does not have a constitution. Guys. You have to get a constitution, and I think sometimes the best thing that was done in some countries, like after World War II, the Japanese constitution has a distinction of being the only constitution written in a language other than Japanese. It's actually written in American English, and for many years, whenever they made amendments, it always has been in English. But what happens though, they've never modified the original basis of the Constitution. So maybe what we should do basically is, since there are too many hands in the pie though, maybe we should just go and make the Constitution English or something. Some other languages where people who have their hands in the pie or hands in making the soup are not part of it. Someone choose a language that is neutral and that is common to everyone to read and understand. That though. But cultural identity is important. It is important. And when I hear the Palestinian government speak at the United Nations as well, and I listened to the rebuttal. I could see from the one rebuttal from the person who was captured and held hostage, her hands were still shaking, and even to this day, even though she's sitting next to the Israeli ambassador. So, cultural identity is important. It's needed. but it's not. It shouldn't be to the point that people really have to shake their hands. Also, it shouldn't be to the point that genocide is done, where people are starved to death and denied medical things, and hospitals are attacked. Of whether there's a justification or not, or even journalists are killed, whether there's a justification or not. Journalists are supposed to have neutrality, especially when they're wearing a press vest. If a journalist is considered a terrorist, then basically what should happen is the journalist should be apprehended and then sent to the International Criminal Court or to the United Nations to be evaluated for that, not shot on sight. And that though, I mean that's something that's reminiscent of many times of the old Soviet Union, where like I was watching an episode of Riley where they had a thing of Stalin, and Stalin said, "Well, I'd like you to make a list of people who are protesting against me," and the guy made a list. And he noticed the guy's name. He put his name on it. He said, "Well, I'd like you to retype this list and take your name off." He said, "Okay." And so he went retype. And then he looked at it. He said, "Are you sure your name's off this?" He says, "Yes, yes, comrade." He says, "Okay, well, take this list to the military commissar. All these people are to be shot at dawn." And what happened, my grandma's right when she saw it, she said, "Yep, that's exactly what Stalin would have done." And the reason why Stalin didn't kill the one person, as my grandmother explained, was although Stalin was a Cossack, he was an educated, cultured Cossack, but he still had that Cossack thing. The problem that exists in some cultures is you have some things where certain people, even though they're comedian and a Cossack, they still have that thing that where basically people are afraid to or still remember the old ancestral history. There are other people in the Ukraine that are basically are more culture and educated. That I think a better spokesperson, the one person that's at the United Nations for the Ukraine, the one person that's the vice president that appears on the CBS Sunday morning show, Meet the Press. Those, but I think basically as far as the current leadership in Ukraine, just like the current leadership in Israel with the Likud party, then the government needs to have has to have re-election, has to have election, and there has to be either there has to be a vote of confidence, or if there isn't a vote of confidence, the government has to fall and elections have to be called. Because I wonder if the true cultural identity of the Israeli people is being expressed by allowing this genocide to continue. That though, because it seems like a genocide to me, though. I mean, I'm surprised that people haven't referred to Netanyahu as a Gruppenführer like that, though, or his party as that by what they're doing, though. You're not supposed to attack civilians, not supposed to starve civilians. Warfare is supposed to be between combatants, and that's the Geneva Convention, Human Rights Convention. However, both sides have their hands dirty, as our Italian friend would say. Both sides have their hands dirty. So basically, neither side are angels. However, it's going to take a strong third party to resolve this. And the problem is, when a strong third party to resolve this, they're going to have to act like a tough principal in the school. They're going to have to make basically that both sides hate the principal, so that basically both sides stay in peace with each other. And that's what I think what probably is going to have to be done. But the thing is, cultural identity is important in light of cultural existences. But when it's violent and it interferes in other people's civil rights, social rights, constitutional rights, then that's not a culture. Then that's something else. I don't know what the word is, but with the speeches at the United Nations today, I do agree with the Palestinian minister that cultural identity is needed, and that a neutral protection force is needed to make sure that those who are not who are civilians now are protected and can be fed. Regarding the remarks from the delegate from Israel, I can see with the woman with the hand shaking, even though she's been rescued, she's still terrified, and basically there are still concerns there. So this is where basically we're going to have a strong principle, and the strong principle is going to have to take the two bullies in on each side and make sure that they discipline each of the group, and make it that basically that both groups hate the principle in order to keep that area in peace. But that's what we need is a strong third party principle. because right now it looks like there are two power groups, two bully groups. And in school, the way you stop there is you have a strong principal, bring both of them and let them know who's in charge. Well, let me know what you think. This has been the New Ideas with Diana. And as always, you can reach me on YouTube, X, Facebook, Pinterest. And please remember with comments, sometimes it takes a while for me to respond to comments due to my health. And normally, any invitations to travel, I cannot. My health, I cannot travel outside here. So if you wish to sometimes travel and meet me, you're always welcome to come where I live in Wisconsin. We can meet someplace like Barnes and Noble or Wendy's or someplace else. Well, this concludes Ideas with Diana, episode 2.